A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our cases this week, 2 high school students plead guilty to murdering their Spanish teacher. Police say they beat her to death with a bat for giving out a bad grade, a grade which would have brought down the GPA of one of these students. Well, neither one of them will ever have to worry about their GPA again because they're not going to college, they're going to prison, likely for the rest of their lives. But first, beware of the woman who knocks on your door with a cheesecake because it could be poisoned. Police in New York say the cheesecake, laced with tranquilizer, was the intended murder weapon, and the target was another woman who looked just like the lady carrying the cake box. Thank goodness the victim survived. What could be the possible motive here? Authorities say that the cheesecake lady needed a new ID because she was wanted by Russian police for a murder under similar circumstances. Well, this is one of those cases where the truth really is stranger than fiction. We are recording this on Wednesday, April 26th of 2023. Our guest today is Tracy Tamborra, a criminal justice professor at the University of New Haven in Connecticut, a friend of the show. Tracy is a nationally recognized expert on domestic violence, sexual assault, and the effects of all of this on the criminal justice system. Tracy, welcome back. How are you?
I'm very well, Anna, and I'm kind of coveting this vest. I like this A vest. If you find one with a T, please send it to me.
I shall shop the internet for you, Tracy.
Thank you. You're better with social media than I am. Anything internet related, I think I have faith in you, Anna.
It's so funny. You know, I do shopping on Instagram. I really do. I'm one of those people. I see the ad and I fall for it every time.
Okay, the T vest. I'm waiting. It's very professorial.
It really is. It's perfect for the fall. We'll work on that. Oh my gosh, Tracy, I'm glad you're here this week. You know, these cases are very unusual. They don't have the usual domestic violence, which I know is your level of expertise in these cases, but there's a lot of depravity here. So, and I think you got that covered.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So even as the NYPD says, this is a very bizarre case. The accused here is 47-year-old Victoria Nasarova, and she has been convicted of attempted murder and has been sentenced to 21 years in prison. And here's the thing that's just amazing. She didn't like her sentence, so as she walked out of the Queens courthouse, you know, being walked out to the back to go back into the jail cell, she said to the judge, F you. And that's the cleaned up version of what she said to the judge. Can you believe this?
Yes. Well, she laced a cheesecake full of poison, so the FU seems appropriate. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, I don't think she's going to help her case with appeals here, right? Because if her attorney's going to appeal this, that little FU stunt at the end.
Yeah.
All right. So the victim here, who survived the poisoning, is 35-year-old Olga Civic. Now, apparently the two women look a lot alike. And the theory was that Victoria, the one accused here and convicted, was going to take over Olga's life. And she needed to do this because Victoria was wanted by the Russian authorities for murder. Not just a little something, but a murder. According to the Queens District Attorney, Victoria is suspected of drugging and killing her neighbor. Police say that she fled to the United States and was hiding in Brooklyn. Okay, so that's the motivation here. Boy, I don't know what to make of this one, Tracy. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what happened in Russia and why she is wanted on these charges. But let's get back to what happened in New York in August of 2016. Police say that Victoria arrived at Olga's house in Forest Hills with a cheesecake. And the cheesecake was laced with tranquilizer, but not all the slices, because apparently when they sat down to have the cheesecake, Victoria had some slices that did not have the tranquilizer, but the targeted slices were, of course, for Olga. So as soon as Olga ate this cheesecake, she started to feel sick. She threw up. She passed out. And police say it wasn't until the next day that Olga was found clinging to life in her bed. There were pills all over the bed, as if she had tried to take her own life. She was rushed to the hospital. She survived. And Olga said the last thing she remembered was Victoria walking around her house. So it would have been very interesting for paramedics because they obviously initially probably thought, oh my gosh, we're dealing with an overdose here. She definitely seems intoxicated. And just again, fascinating at what point police were able to figure out what happened. So here is what Olga told ABC7 in New York about that incident.
Gonna bring you very delicious cheesecake. When I eat that cake, I feel right away very, very sick. I lose my vision.
Olga says that some cash, jewelry, and a handbag were missing, along with her Ukrainian passport and, very important, her U.S. work permit. Also, but what was left behind, which was not very clever, was the cheesecake and the box, which ended up testing positive for a tranquilizer. Police say they also found Victoria's DNA on the cake box and all over the house. That was the incriminating evidence here. Authorities then arrested Victoria on charges, including attempted murder, burglary, assault. She was arrested in March of 2017. Now, police say when Victoria was arrested, she had Olga's passport on her. Again, more incriminating evidence. So I don't know how clever this Victoria is. Clearly not too. Now, it's such a bizarre case because it just doesn't sound real. And, the women, they kind of look alike, which is why Victoria thought Olga would be a good person to try this on, that she could pull this off. So when they started the trial, prosecutors actually had to say to the jury, okay, we know this is bizarre. This is not a joke. The case here, the facts of the case really are about a poisoned cheesecake and how one woman tried to kill another woman for her identity, and this was the method that she used. Ridiculous, right? How crazy is this?
Sure.
And that's kind of what caught our attention in all of this. So the prosecution presented evidence that Victoria had met a man online and had drugged him. And had stolen his watch and his wallet. They were trying to show a pattern here. And she then she went shopping with his Amex card. Oh, that Victoria.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's some signs that Victoria is a very sophisticated criminal in the fact that, again, she's premeditating, she's taking some precautions and measures, she's meeting individuals. But then there are other indications that the individual is reckless at the same time. She's quite interesting because she's not following into any kind of typology or pattern regarding, so sometimes you can see this with predatory offenders, predatory rapists, or a serial killer, where they seem to follow an MO or a pattern. She's a little all over the place. So,
right. Yeah. Kind of has a little bit of a pattern and then is unpredictable. And I think it's that lack of control that we see emerging either when things don't go her way or she just doesn't care. She's definitely a very tough person without question. You just get that sense of her. So a little bit more on Victoria. They also had a previous charge on her. She was picked up in May of 2016 for shoplifting furs from the discount retailer in New York, Century 21, one of my favorites. I don't know if it's still in business or not. And when the U.S. authorities, the police, meaning when they picked her up on this shoplifting, they didn't realize that she had one of these Interpol Red Notices, red alerts out for her. They just didn't make that connection. The lady's just trying to steal something from the store. So she wasn't picked up then. But what's interesting, and I don't know how this would work because it's international law. I've done a few of these with these red notices. So there is no extradition treaty between the United States and Russia, which means there's no real obligation to return her back to Russia. So I think she knew that when she fled to the U.S. And the only thing that maybe they could have picked her up on, meaning, and then sent her back to Russia, would have been an immigration violation.
Right. That's what I'm wondering here. Also, this is not a high profile case like we saw with Brittany Griner or someone else where you would be using the individual to swap. But sometimes, depending on the district, the federal prosecutor involved in any of these cases may use this. I personally was involved in 2 cases in which the prosecutor wanted to get rid of the foreign national. So it's within the federal government's right to immediately extradite her to Russia, whether we have the agreement or not, because if she isn't here in good legal standing, so if she doesn't have a permanent residency or a citizenship, oftentimes you'll see a prosecutor want to, these are the words I've heard before, unload the offender. So they
But Tracy, I have a question then. So, because we always ask the question, what would justice look like? Does that mean that it's possible that the prosecutor could have just sent her back to Russia and not have prosecuted her for her crimes here?
Yeah, so they can decide if they want to have the individual serve out their entire sentence here and then extradite, or they could extradite at an earlier process, post conviction. They have to be convicted. We saw that a lot, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, with individuals coming from Central America, from Mexico, that immediately upon conviction, they're deported. We don't hold them, because you can imagine there's kind of a philosophical argument here, right? Like, if we know you're going to be, your justice is that we're getting you out of our country. There is some sort of that. And also we know if the prosecutor knows they're going to send her to a more punitive country like Russia, whose punishments are even harsher than ours, then they might, you could have this justice in another manner, unless the prosecutor thinks that she won't serve out any time. But there's a couple of options on the table. We could extradite her now post-conviction, and for her not to serve out her sentence. Again, what's justice? I don't know. The justice is that she's responsible for the crimes she has. So either she can serve it out here, maybe she's tried and served longer time in Russia for an actual murder. This was an attempted. How do you quantify justice in this case? I don't know.
I don't know. That is really tricky. Now, to get back then to the murder in Russia, just to give everyone some context here of what we're dealing with. Again, she was smart enough to know if she came here, she wouldn't be extradited. So according to Interpol, Victoria befriended her neighbor, and she's accused of stealing $17,000, some jewelry. Now, here's what's interesting. Before she allegedly disposed of the body, police claimed that Victoria was captured on a traffic camera in Russia, and she was driving a rented vehicle with the body in the passenger seat. So, again, I don't know the Russian justice system. I don't know how they look at evidence there. This certainly is very damning evidence if it is true. And that's not all. According to Russian authorities, Victoria allegedly seduced the lead police officer investigator on the murder case there. And so therefore, she was not detained in that incident. Okay, this is unbelievable. And that officer was later fired, according to published reports. The reason this case, I find it so fascinating, it's like international intrigue. You got a murder, an attempted murder, trying to take someone's identity. You have private investigators. I mean, there's a lot of layers to this thing.
The other thing is, I was on this program with you a few months ago where we talked about the individual who was brought to justice because one of his former students saw him teaching a course. I think he was doing martial arts or something like this, right?
Yes, wanted for murder in California, yes. And he was, teaching English.
And then a few months ago, I gave an interview to the New York magazine's The Cut about a young woman who was murdered in New York, and her friends played Instagram sleuth and were able to assist the police to track down the perpetrator, the murderer, in another country. And so there's more and more cases coming forward in which the internet is being used by non-professionals who are serving as detectives to, engage in these higher level crimes. And some of that, I think, is, of course, a product of the time as technology is advancing. Of course, it'll be used this way. But also, I think it, in a strange way, fills a gap in the criminal justice system, the American criminal justice system. When there is a case that involves international borders and investigations, a lot of police departments don't have the kind of funds necessary to engage in either a technological search or definitely a physical search. Mm-hmm. And so the case will sit cold. And a lot of times I'll get calls and say, oh, do you think the case is sitting cold because it's a poor victim or an immigrant victim or an immigrant or a victim of color? Do you think there's some socio-political power thing going on? And my answer is always could be, but it also could be a lack of funding available to police departments to carry out expensive investigations, like finding people in other countries or other jurisdictions. So I think that this case is interesting for that. And the fact that you had the daughter perusing Facebook to provide information to authorities, it does show you the power of these internet tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all the information that this private investigator was able to find and locate her in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Now, following her arrest, Victoria gave an interview to the New York Post because Victoria's got her own version of things. And at this point, of course, she was just charged and presumed innocent. And she was claiming that she was not attempting to poison Olga, that this whole incident was a misunderstanding. Of course it was. The cheesecake is laced with poison. Her fingerprints are everywhere, but it's just a misunderstanding.
And you have her purse and ring.
Right. And her passport in your bag. Right. Okay. So Victoria said, quote, "The last time I saw Olga, she already was not feeling good. She said that she either ate something or got food poisoning." Right. Good luck with that one. A nice little story. That's not what anyone believed here. So Victoria's trial began on January 30th of this year, and prosecutors claimed that Victoria needed Olga dead in order for her to take over this identity so she could avoid being returned to Russia, and just live out her life here. Mm-hmm. So a jury convicted Victoria on February 9th of 2023 on the charges that include attempted murder in the second degree, attempted assault in the first degree, assault in the second degree, unlawful imprisonment in the first degree, and petite larceny. Does that mean, stealing things that are not of huge value? Is that what petite?
Yeah. So
every state has something different.
Every state has it different, but usually some states, if it doesn't cross the $10,000 threshold, then it is a larceny. Yeah.
Got it. So that's what that charge is. And then on April 19th, Victoria was sentenced to 21 years in prison by Queens Supreme Court Justice Kenneth C. Holder. Victoria attempted to have the last word in that courtroom, yelling "F you" to the judge after her sentence was delivered. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Victoria's defense has indicated that they plan to appeal, calling her sentence excessive, though the sentence was 4 years short of the potential maximum that she faced.
Yeah, I don't see the appeal here. I don't see where the grounds for the appeal are. There appears to be a lot of forensic evidence. And again, you can't, if the amount of time being that the judge determines to sentence falls within the state guidelines, that in and of itself does not allow for the appeal. So I'd be interested to see what is this appeal on.
Yeah, well, Victoria's got her own path here. Yeah. Clearly, the rules do not apply to Miss Victoria. Sure. She's just doing her own thing. All right. Our next case is out of Fairfield, Iowa, where two teens have pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in the bludgeoning death of their teacher. Why? Because they didn't like the grade that she gave out. This is a case that we first covered on the podcast about a year and a half ago when the teacher was murdered. The victim here is 66-year-old Noema Graber, and she was a high school Spanish teacher. Unbelievable. 18-year-old Jeremy Goodale and 17-year-old Willard Miller have pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. I'm just astonished. I hear I realize motive doesn't have to be proven at all in court. It's about whether someone has done something or not. But based on their own testimony of what they said to police, based on the evidence that was gathered, based on the fact that they've now pleaded, really? You take a life because of a poor grade? Because maybe you deserve that grade, buddy?
Yeah. The other thing that stands out to me is the manner of death, Anna, because this is very personal. This is an older individual, right? Obviously, probably much more physically vulnerable than these two, and bludgeoning to death. Of course, in the world of criminology, we don't say, oh, you're a better person if you just shoot someone than if you stab them and cut them up. No, I mean, both of these things are taking a life. But the manner in which you take someone's life is a little bit indicative of the relationship to some degree. And we've always focused on crimes like that would involve knife or, your hands, things that require you to be in a very close personal space with the victim, as to be more crimes of passion that really are invoking a lot more anger. That's not to say that you can't be very angry with a handgun, of course. But so for me, the thing that was the most interesting was the mode of death here. The fact that they bludgeoned an older individual to death signifies that this really was a very personal crime for these individuals.
Oh, yeah. As we'll get into what the court records said about what the police discovered, this was apparently planned. Mm-hmm. And they had stalked her because she had a routine. She liked to take a walk every afternoon around 4 o'clock, the same trail, parked nearby. She had a pattern that she followed, pretty much, very routine. And, so many students at that high school were interviewed after the murder. She really was a teacher that was loved there. And I don't know what possesses someone to look at a bad grade and say, the way I'm going to handle this isn't that I'm going to study harder, I'll do better next time, but I'm going to kill the teacher because it's the teacher's fault. It isn't my own fault for maybe not doing well enough in the class.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much information coming forward now, especially post-COVID, about the emotional toll that teaching is taking on the profession, right? That teachers are experiencing, the amount of emotional energy that they're having to put into their work. I mean, a math teacher or a science teacher is no longer just teaching math and science. They're also providing mental health services and doing restorative justice programs and healing circles, like the things that are coming out of schools that I'm reading about, but also that I'm, as a mother of 3 with educators in my family, that I'm seeing that they're being tasked to do, is just taking a toll on teaching. So to have these high profile cases like the 6-year-old boy who shot his teacher, or these boys who bludgeoned to death their teacher over a grade, this is really shining a light on what is happening in the American public school, in the American school system. I don't know if it was public or private, but the American school system, and you're right, level of accountability. How many things could you have done differently to improve your grade or change your grade? For most of us, we wouldn't even fathom the idea of taking the life of our teacher, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, and we've all had some teachers that have been tougher on us than others, and maybe, and that, you know what? It's just life. That is just life, and you have to deal with it. And high school,
their car, right? You key their car, or you leave a nasty note, or.
But right? Even that, I would still say, is highly inappropriate, right? But those are more juvenile ways, right? Yes. More juvenile, immature ways of handling a situation, and not particularly well thought out, but maybe more age appropriate.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. I mean, you cannot take a life. You cannot take a life over a grade. So, Willard Miller allegedly went to discuss a poor grade that he received with the teacher, and he was going to do that on the afternoon of November 2nd of 2021. And according to court records, he planned the murder, he stalked the teacher, and even discussed his plans on Snapchat. Very incriminating evidence. The teacher, as we said, liked to take her walk at 4 o'clock, and that is where she was killed.
Yes, so as you were saying, Anna, in the beginning of this, the introduction, this was she was also stalked. So they were following her daily routine, incredible invasion of privacy in it, the level of victimization that she experienced, that obviously culminates in the ultimate form of victimization, which is murder. This was ongoing. And so again, in pointing out that, sure, there's other juvenile ways to handle frustration with a teacher, that it results in this signifies that one or both of them have some other disturbance or some other history I'd like to know a little bit more about that you would think to resist. Anytime something is so socially abnormal, you have to question what is going on in the background of these individuals, because this is not a normal response to high school frustration in any means.
This is not how you solve a problem, right? This is not a normal way to solve a problem. Murder does not fix the situation. It, in fact, makes it so much worse for these two. And the fact that at no point in their planning of this, that either one of them said to the other or to themselves, should we really be doing this? Like, at what point? How is that possible that no one said, you know what, this is a bad idea?
In many other high-profile murder cases, in which there's more time to, you have 4 or 5 years post the act, you have time to do interviews. What you often find is one person was the very strong leader, and the other person is going along with this. So it'll be interesting after this case. The individuals are incarcerated, and I'm sure some interviewer, whether it's a journalist or an academic, is going to go in. If I had to place a bet on it, given what I know about other high-profile murders that include 2 or more offenders, it's usually there's one very powerful, very strong figure, and the other one is kind of goes along, is a follower.
And what's interesting, and we're going to get to that in a second, is as part of these plea deals, we still don't know exactly what happened, but because each one of them keeps saying that it was the other one that was the leader and the other one was just the lookout. And so authorities at this point are like, you know what? We don't believe either one of you. We think you both participated. We're just not believing the he did it. And they're still doing the he did it to this in the very end here, but both of them are going to prison for all of this. Now, witnesses told authorities that they saw Graber's van leaving the park, okay? She didn't leave the park, the van did, at about 4:42 p.m. with 2 males in the front seats. According to authorities, another witness spotted her vehicle parked on a rural road around 5 p.m., and then witnesses claim to have seen 2 white males exiting that vehicle. Police say that another witness came forward to say that Willard and Jeremy called this friend and asked them for a ride. And that ride, when they went to pick him up, was not far from where the teacher's van was abandoned. Again, how could they be so worried about their frickin' grades if neither one of them is smart enough to figure out all of the evidence that they have left behind, okay? Not that bright.
Right. And listen, intelligence is measured in 100 ways, right? So maybe they score high on tests, but as you're pointing out, there is no common sense here. That's why I suspect, in addition to the manner in which the murder occurs, that there's something much more personal. That grade coming from that teacher represented something to one of those boys. I don't know if it was the audacity of her to be able to give them that grade. I don't know what was going on for them, but it seems like it's much more personal, because you're right. Somebody who's actually quite worried about their future and what that grade might set them up for is probably not going to kill their teacher, number one. And, the manner in which they attempt to hide it might be more sophisticated. So, this is probably just completely emotionally driven. Although they had time to react because they're stalking her. So that's why it's a murder, not a manslaughter. If one of those boys would have lost their temper in class and beat her to death in class, you probably would have had a manslaughter charge because it would have been a crime of passion, heat of the moment. But you're moved into murder because it's premeditated, it's planned, albeit not very well. Yeah.
No. No, not at all. So the teacher's body was discovered the next day on November 3rd of 2021. She had been beaten to death with a baseball bat. Her body was hidden underneath a tarp with a wheelbarrow and some railroad ties covering it. Investigators determined that the cause of death was trauma to the head. When police first interviewed Willard Miller, he allegedly expressed frustration. Okay, so your teacher's been found dead, and you're talking to the cops. The cops say he said he didn't like the way she taught Spanish. Okay, as opposed to saying, oh my God, my teacher's dead. No, his reaction is, you know what? She really sucked at teaching Spanish. Okay, and then he said he had no knowledge of the murder, and he even called her an asshole. He tells the cops that the teacher was an asshole. She gave him a bad grade, and that grade was hurting his GPA. What does that tell you, Tracy, about this individual?
It's very difficult, right? Again, I haven't interviewed him. There could be a few things. Perhaps the individual's out of touch with reality. I don't know. That's a very small percentage of the population, right? And so the individual is so fixated on the grade and out of touch with reality that they're only focused on the thing. Her death is an insignificant consequence of the fact that she gave him a bad grade. So that's a I don't know, 2% possibility. The other point could be that the individual is quite violent, quite entitled, is not, it doesn't realize that that everything that they're saying is incriminating them. That's a lot. And that, again, the individual doesn't have any kind of mental disturbance, some sort of severe mental health issue that would preclude them from being aware of reality, but they do have perhaps a personality disorder or perhaps some other disturbance which makes them feel entitled. And again, they are then just reacting to this grade. There's a third possibility here in that the person's in denial. So that's been seen before, that they're in a temporary state of shock afterwards, and what they're doing is fixating on the justification for the behavior, not actually the fact that they did something heinous. So you could have a few things happening with this individual. From they don't have the mental capacity to understand that what they did was terrible, and they're just focused on the impetus of grade, to I'm in denial, I'm entitled, I don't really care, she's insignificant. Her life and death is not important to me. The only thing the only place she has in my life is as the person who gave me a bad grade, to someone who is just in this kind of justification phase of the acknowledgement. I just need to justify, and I'm not even going to consider the heinous act that I engaged in.
I'll toss one more in there.
Okay.
Evil. It's not a legal term. It's not a psychiatric term. It's a moral term. I'm just going with evil. That's it. You and I have talked about this before, right? As a criminologist, I don't have any theory that focuses on evil. Right.
After 1750, but sure, the human inside of me can say sometimes, this act is unexplainable. This person has crossed the line. I'm trying to use, of course, some theory and what has held up before, what we've seen before about why individuals during an interrogation or an interview report the information that they report. And it's usually one of those three things: denial, complete ignorance because they don't have the mental capacity, or they're just so focused on one aspect that they can't see the entirety.
Investigators say that Willard Miller's story changed over time. According to court records, he said later that he had knowledge of the murder, but he was not a participant. Then another time, Miller allegedly told police that he was forced by the real killers to aid in moving the teacher's body, claiming that masked kids made him do it. These imaginary again, that's like a story a 5-year-old tells you. Oh, somebody came in here and did this. It's absurd. So Jeremy and Willard were formally charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder about 2 weeks after. And this would have been on November 12th. And the most incriminating evidence, of course, would have been putting them at the scene of the crime, the conversations that were on Snapchat that had been preserved by one of the other students. There was a lot here. A lot of evidence here. Now, when they were first arrested, they made an argument, their defense attorneys made arguments that they should not be tried as adults, even though they were on the cusp. And the prosecutor just didn't go for it. It's like, no, you will be tried as adults. So the defense argued that one of the reasons that they wanted the ability to have them tried as juveniles is that they would have a better chance at rehabilitation. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. Do you have any opinions on that?
So we don't do a very good job in the United States of rehabilitating juveniles or adults. I think in theory, you have a better chance at rehabilitation as a juvenile, but one of my colleagues who's a national expert in juvenile delinquency, the data is not showing that. So I don't think we do a very good job rehabilitating either adults or children. So I think that's off the table. What should be on the table is their emotional maturity, their cognitive abilities. There's a lot of emerging research now in criminology and psychology, neuropsychology about, maybe you or your audience has heard about, a frontal lobe development. And so this frontal lobe development that has us assess risk and has us determine whether our actions are, nobody thinks that your frontal lobe isn't fully developed and you think murder is a good thing. No, that's not what we're saying. But one of the arguments that's being made to push off the age of juvenile and to push off the age of adult sanctioning is the fact that we're not fully functioning until that frontal lobe is developed. So again, I'm not sure if I would rely on you have a better chance of rehabilitation in the juvenile system versus the adult system. I don't believe there's evidence to suggest that. If you were going to argue, I think you're better off arguing, if you're the attorneys for these two, the individuals are immature, and the punitive nature of the adult system doesn't account for immaturity. It just, either you're guilty or innocent, and regardless of your maturity level, you're going to receive a harsh punishment.
So the trials were going to begin. Apparently, they were going to be tried individually, and the first trial was set for this month, April. And that's when Jeremy Goodall struck a deal with prosecutors in which he would testify against Willard. And that then inspired Willard to enter a plea deal to avoid trial entirely. So on April 18th, Miller and Goodall pleaded guilty to the charges of first-degree murder. So the thing is, even with these plea deals, we still don't know exactly who did what, because they're still pulling this stunt that the other one did it. And I don't know if that's because they think that may have an impact on the sentence that they receive. That if, you can prove that the other one did it, that one will get a worse sentence than the one who claims was just, the lookout. Prosecutors here are recommending a life sentence with the possibility of parole after either 25 or 30 years. The way I read this was, the one who struck the deal first is probably going to get the 25, and the one who came along second is going to get the 30, if that's what the judge agrees to, because the judge does have to make a decision.
Right. And the judge, here's where age is going to come in as a mitigating factor, right? Because the judge may then determine, because of the age, he isn't going to go for the maximum. Now, Iowa, it does not have the death penalty any longer. So that wasn't going to be used by the prosecutor as a bargaining chip. But they do still have life imprisonment. And so I don't know if that was ever put on the table by the prosecutor to get the plea. Oftentimes the reason someone takes a plea, right, is because the prosecutor is saying, you either take the plea and we'll give you 25 years, or we go to trial and I'm going for life without the possibility of parole.
Right.
But yes, I think you're correct to assume that whoever initiated the plea process, whoever agreed to turn state's evidence first, is going to get the lesser of the time.
Right. And that makes sense. I get that. Now, along with their sentences, the two will be jointly responsible for about $150,000 in restitution to be paid to the family of the teacher. And, the sad thing is that the teacher, Noema Graber, was killed days before her 67th birthday. And she started teaching at Fairfield High School in 2012.
So you bring up a great point about restitution, right? Because victims advocates for a long time, we have argued that restitution should be part of the criminal justice process, that there needs to be some monetary gesture made on behalf of the perpetrator to the victim to try to restore, or in this case, the victim's family. Here's where the dilemma comes, though. If restitution is to be paid by the offender, how do they pay this restitution while incarcerated, right? And so these are these arguments that get made all the time. And I don't think most people would say, oh, let the boys out after 2 years. So
No.
But it is something, sometimes restitution orders are made, and they're kind of this good faith, but never expected to be paid, application. So I just wanted to bring that point up, that restitution is something that we fought for, a lot of us who worked in victim services for a long time. But unfortunately, in these heinous cases, they never come to fruition because the individual is incarcerated. And then when they are released, they don't really have a way to obtain employment that would allow for a large restitution order to be repaid.
Well, it is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases that you all are talking about on our social media. We have two guests today. Not only our producer, Will Updike, but my little friend over here who I have been fostering for 3 weeks, and she will be adopted tomorrow. We found her a family. Her name is Natalie Yellowjacket, named after one of those shows, but I haven't seen it. She was, she's very sweet. She was rescued from the divorce shelter with 2 other dogs. And when the rescue called me and said, please, we're getting 3 dogs out today, can you take one of them? I was like, how was I going to say no, right? How was I going to say no?
Hope she doesn't share the same fate as any of the Yellow Jackets. But anyway,
I haven't seen it. I don't know what the show is about.
That's a little teaser you're gonna have to catch up on.
Spoil. Okay.
But this week we have, in honor of Tracy being here, I got to bring a fast food crime to the table. We have a gun and some fast food, just an excellent mix to bring Tracy's expertise to. So this one comes out of Picayune, Mississippi, where one man's attempt to hide a firearm was the taco of the entire Picayune Police Department following a traffic stop last week. So this happened on Friday, April 14th, according to the Picayune Police Department. They stopped a car for allegedly violating a traffic law on East Canal Street. So they pulled over the driver. The driver here is Olivia Neff. She was in the car with passenger Devin Mitchell. Now, when they pulled his car over, Picayune police said that they had probable cause to search the vehicle, where they found a distribution amount of meth, not sure how much that is, liquid heroin, and other drug paraphernalia. But they apparently went through these fast food bags as well, where they discovered Mitchell, the passenger here, his handgun inside a quesadilla in a Taco Bell bag. So
in the actual food? In the food?
Yeah, it's like mixed in there. I'll show a picture for people there. There's a gun. There's also something that looks like some sort of pipe. I don't know. I don't care to comment. But police arrested Mitchell on charges of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, while in possession of a firearm, possession of a controlled substance, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a weapon by a felon, and possession of paraphernalia, a whole laundry list there. While the driver here, Neff, was cited for disregard for a traffic device, but she was released at the scene. Records show that Mitchell, the passenger here, the gun owner, is in custody in Pearl River County, Mississippi. But yeah, I don't know what exactly led them to search the bags, probably when they discovered some of this other stuff. I don't know if, they just gave the bags like a little lift and you felt that one was like physically a lot heavier, and that's what led to the search. I doubt, the first thing that they were going through was probably that fast food.
Will, can I just interrupt you for a second? I don't know if everybody in the viewing audience got how clever you were there, but when you started this, you said this is the taco of discussion, and I thought that is clever. It's the taco of discussion.
Thank you. We do our best over here. This was a wild one. We got a bunch of comments on this. Snow White said, so they have regular, supreme, and loaded now. Awesome.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's great. Also, are you a Taco Bell person, Anna?
I do like Taco Bell. You know, for the longest time, I loved Taco Bell and loved their little, they used to do these little cinnamon crispy things for dessert. I don't know if they have them anymore. Yeah, I am a Taco Bell person. I am.
I personally have just gone through like a little bit of a Taco Bell renaissance. I'm a fan, but like I haven't eaten it in like 3 years, and then I had it one time, and now I've had it like 3 times in the last month. It's phenomenal. Moose Juice said the sauce got more kick than I remember, which actually not that much kick. The hottest of their sauces is a little underwhelming. But Rima T said, who knew quesadillas are that rich in iron?
Oh, good one. Yeah.
Solid. Very solid. Very solid. Yeah. Johnny S said, yes, the old Glocko Bell. Love it.
Wow.
Love it.
They've really outdone themselves on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, great headline, but the comments here, just all of you, so great. We're going to end with a pun as per usual. Haley M said he's Nacho, smartest criminal. In queso, you didn't notice. 2 cheese puns in 1 comment. How did you do it? How did you do it? I think we can wrap it up for the day. But that is going to do it for this week's comment section. Tracy, I'm still waiting on some in-depth coverage on the study of crime and fast food restaurants. So I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting. I hope it's something you put your students to research.
Yes, we have to co-write this paper because you've really been spoon-feeding me this new avenue of research. So
it's so bizarre. It's just such a weird overlap.
But I think one of your viewers said it best the last time. Like, you know, you're smoking a little weed, you're doing a little something, you get a little bit of the munchies, you get a lot of hand. You know, like there's this. It does seem like there's probably a natural evolution to a Friday night, you know, at the Burger King gone bad. So I think there's a lot of chronological variables to explore here.
Friday night at the Burger King gone bad. If you decide to write that one, Tracy, I think that's a bestseller.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for that week's comment section. Thank you so much, everybody. I will see you next week.
Well, Tracy, it is always a pleasure to have you on the program. We always love your insight. And I know sometimes it's really hard to provide insight when we're dealing with, as I say, this level of depravity of a lack of humanity in how we deal with each other. So
thank you. Yeah, you had 2 tough cases. There's not a lot of research on individuals who engage in such horrific acts of violence for such little motivation. Yeah. So it's really hard to draw on any previous research or theory, but this exists. This is also crime.
Yeah, it really is. Where can people find you? Can people follow you, or any information on your papers or stuff like that?
Anna has shamed me into finally getting a social media. So I will be coming on Instagram next month. My daughter's helping me to set that up.
Do you love that your daughter's helping you? I love that.
Yes,
it's so hilarious.
I need to help. But in the meantime, all of my work is found at the University of New Haven Department of Criminal Justice website. So yes, but soon I will be at a social media venue near you.
That's so funny. And thank you for having me virtually visit your campus and talk to your criminology students. It was really fun to talk with them. I really enjoyed that time with them.
They were excited. Anna was a rock star. So your audience already knows this. Now my students are more aware. And half of the students said they followed your show. So.
Oh, I love that. That is so cool. I love to hear that. I think that's really, I love that. Really do. So you can find me on social media at Anna G News. That's Anna with one N. Sometimes I post about crime. Sometimes I post about dogs in need of homes. Probably more dogs than anything else. That's where my heart is. You can find this episode and all our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can sign up to receive our newsletter at truecrimedaily.com. So until next week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia, and as we always say, don't do crime.